what went behind the decision? What does he bring to the table that the other quarterbacks didn't, that gave Brian Kelly the confidence and said, yes, I want you to be the starting quarterback against the Seminoles?
Experience and efficiency. I think that's the thing. And I think Jack has a little bit more aggressiveness. I think sometimes when people watch film of a player at a previous school, they say, well, they ran that offense because of his ability, as opposed to knowing what Wisconsin is and saying, no, they ran that offense because they're Wisconsin. That's what they do. And so I think some people have a view of Jack Coan that he's this, low percentage, manage the game kind of guy. And Notre Dame has confidence he's more than that. Again, will he be? We'll have to find out. We'll start finding out on September 5th, but that's the confidence level they have. We've heard from the minute he got on campus that the coaches, they were surprised by his athleticism because he never ran at Wisconsin. They were surprised by his arm strength because he only threw 32 balls in 14 games in 2019. He only threw 34 balls that went 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. That's not a lot. But he was very effective when he did make those throws. And so, Notre Dame is going to have a more aggressive offense this year. They've got a lot of athletic weapons. And I think when people look at last season, Notre Dame went into that season thinking they were going to have Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey as their sort of two big play weapons. Mm-hmm. They both got hurt in camp. Well, actually, Kevin Austin got hurt right before camp started. And so they had to kind of shift gears and be more ball control and those type of things. And so I think they're hoping that they're going to be able to get back to the offense they wanted to be last year, which is spread the field, get the ball outside, take some shots, and then, of course, soften the middle of the defense up so you can then run the football between the tackles. And Jack Coan is the trigger man that they think can be a great decision maker and get the ball where it needs to go. Guy completed 69.6% of his passes in 2019. The last quarterback to come within 5 percentage points of that, which, as you guys know, in completion percentage is a pretty big difference, was a guy named Russell Wilson, who was like about 72. So, his success at Wisconsin was significantly better than any quarterback that came before him up until, obviously, Russell Wilson back in 2011.
Mm-hmm. Brian, I was going to ask you, there's a lot of Florida State fans in here, over 100, and just to kind of get a feel for Notre Dame a little bit and maybe some optimistic things for Florida State. What do you think is Notre Dame's weakness going into this game against Florida State? Is there a certain position group? We just talked about Coan, but this is going to be a packed crowd. Doak Campbell Stadium is going to be riled up. We got a full stadium finally. What would be Florida State? What is Mike Norvell, going to take advantage of with Notre Dame, and maybe what's one of their weaknesses?
I think two things that if I'm Florida State, I'm looking to attack. Number one is I'm trying to get Jermaine Johnson and the ends matched up against Notre Dame's tackles. Josh Lugg is going to be starting a right tackle. He started 5 games of right tackle in 2019. He was more of an interior guy last year. Hasn't proven that he can be that top-level tackle like we've seen at Notre Dame the last several years with multiple first- and second-round picks and All-Americans. And then they're starting left tackles, a 5-star recruit, Blake Fisher, true, 6'6", 335, all these great talent. Everybody I know that talks to him, sees him, hey, he's a future top 10 pick, but he's still a true freshman who's never played a college football game, and his first game is going to be at Doak Campbell. So if I'm them, I'm saying, hey, we're going to get Jermaine Johnson. We're going to find out what this young buck can do. That's the first thing I'm going to do, because if Notre Dame has the athleticism advantage on the perimeter and the experience advantage that I believe they have, the greatest neutralizer to that is not letting Jack Coan get into rhythm. And that's the first thing I would do, is try to attack off the edge and do some pressures to get that Notre Dame offensive line, which is, again, 4 new starters. No matter how talented they are, you guys know this, when you have new stars in the offensive line, it can take some time for them to gel and get on the same page and make sure the communication's there and they're picking up twists and stunts and those type of things. If I'm Florida State, I'm going to stun them. I'm going to run twists. I'm going to run pressures. I'm going to bring my linebackers up the middle and say, hey, we're not going to let Jack Coan get time to pick apart our defense, which is also coming together with a bunch of new guys in the secondary and line, in places like that. So I think that's an area where Florida State's going to have to do. And it's kind of like a lot like the Miami game was in 2017. What the mistake Notre Dame made that game was letting Miami stay in that game early and that crowd to get more and more into it and become more and more of a factor. Notre Dame can't allow Florida State to do that. On the other side of the ball, I think the thing Florida State needs to try to do, Notre Dame's got some new guys on defense in the secondary. I think Notre Dame's pass rush is going to be very good. I think their front seven is going to be very good, but they've got a lot of unproven guys in the secondary. I would move the pocket. I would try to I'm not going to sit there and let my offensive line just have to protect the quarterback that's going to line up right behind center the whole time. I'm going to move the pocket. I'm going to get, whether it's Jordan Travis or Mackenzie Milton, out of the pocket, give them time, and then take some shots down the field. Make Notre Dame have to cover longer. And if they can do that, then they're going to have some opportunities to get some plays downfield. If they can't protect the quarterback, then it's going to end up being a long day for the Florida State offense.
Brian, 2 housekeeping things right here. Number 1, here on the FSU Live, we don't say positive things about Miami, so we're not going to act like the Miami Notre Dame game happened in 2017.
Hey, I'm fine with that. I mean, you guys know how that game went. I'm all for pretending that game never happened.
I lived down here. I was at that game. It was disgusting watching those teams play. It's Bobby Bowden Field. We don't acknowledge the other game of that stadium. It'll always be Bobby Bowden Field. So just housekeeping moves there on that one. Who's the guy? Who is the I don't know if you want to say kind of somebody who's flying in under the radar. Or who's somebody that you're watching that you think could have a big game for Notre Dame in this game?
When I watch Florida State, I see a team that, despite having a couple secondary players that are now playing in the National Football League, I see a team that had trouble in coverage last year. You're gonna have, even though Jamie Robinson was a pretty good player at South Carolina, and you've got some guys that were highly ranked recruits. This is going to be a group that I'm testing. I feel a lot about the Florida State secondary from a Notre Dame standpoint as I feel about the Notre Dame secondary if I'm looking at it from a Florida State standpoint. I'm going to try to tack them down the field, and the guy that I think is going to have a chance for Notre Dame to kind of have a breakout season is Kevin Austin, who's a native of Florida. And he's a guy that Notre Dame fans have been waiting to break out since he signed. He was a top 100 recruit, but caught 5 balls as a freshman. Then he was suspended the next year, and then he got hurt last year and only caught 1 ball. And he's had a great camp, but now it's kind of time to turn that. You look great in practice, but can you look great in games? And if he can stay healthy, I think he's a guy that has a chance to have a big year. And of course, this is going to be one of those games where you're going to get an opportunity against an inexperienced secondary to take some shots and hopefully have a bit of a breakout.
Brian, I think the general consensus amongst all of us, and Logan's an FSU. He's a senior at FSU. I'm an FSU grad. Mark's an FSU hater, but called him earlier today.
I'm officially a hater because I picked him 5 and 7. This was just confirmed today, Brian.
Mazel tov, you're a hater. Welcome to the party. But I think generally everyone around here thinks that Notre Dame is going to win this game on September 5th. As a Notre Dame fan, as a Notre Dame supporter, is there any concern of a potential letdown that could see Florida State possibly shocking the college football world and coming out with an upset?
Sure. I mean, Notre Dame lost to South Florida in an opener once. I mean, anything can happen in an opener. And that's kind of why I brought up that game that's no longer to be mentioned earlier is in a game like this where you're playing in it. And I mean no disrespect by this, but when you're playing an inferior opponent, let's be honest, Florida State's got a losing record the last few times. Notre Dame's kind of smacked them around the last couple times they've played right. Notre Dame's 2 playoffs and all that kind of stuff. So I mean this just more from a reputation and I think a talent standpoint and those type of things. The last thing you can do to a team that has some ability and some talent, it is hopefully an ascending program, is at their place to let them hang around, turn the ball over, give them short fields. If Florida State has to go 75 yards every time they get the ball in offense, they're not going to beat Notre Dame. But if they're getting touchdown drives that are 25 yards or 20 yards, and that's kind of what Notre Dame did at Northwestern in 2018, Notre Dame was clearly the more athletic team, the more talented team, but they fumbled the ball in their own territory the first drive of the game, set up a score for Northwestern. Notre Dame was on the verge of pulling away, punts the ball, it gets blocked, sets up another quick Northwestern score, and all of a sudden an inferior opponent's only down 3 points. You can't, and let's be honest, Northwestern is not Florida State, and playing at Northwestern is not like playing at Florida State. So that's the thing you can't do is you just can't let them hang around. The longer they can hang around, the more momentum they get. The last thing you want to do to a team like Florida State that needs a huge shot in the arm from a confidence standpoint is to let them hang around and think they have a chance. You have to put this game away early. And if this gets into the fourth quarter, it's a competitive game, you're going to start feeling a little bit nervous if you're Notre Dame.
So you're picking Florida State. You're willing to go out on pick Florida State, correct?
Well, I like being correct and accurate, so I'm going to not do that, and I'm going to go ahead and go with Notre Dame on this.
And Brian, what you're talking about almost sounds similar to what happened with the North Carolina game when they came in as the number 5 team in the country last year, and Florida State made plays on special teams, tipped interceptions for a pick 6, made the kind of plays that you have to make as an underdog, a significant underdog, to pull off that kind of upset, and the crowd got into it. And for as much of a crowd as was there that night, I don't remember where we were at that point, but there you go. Jason was there.
I was there in that one. I think Logan was still drunk in the parking lot for that first time.
Yeah, but I think that's a great example because if you watch that fourth quarter, Florida State wasn't playing like a team that had a losing record. they were playing like a team that thought they belonged to be on that field with that top 10 opponent. And that's kind of where I'm getting to is when you have a team that has some ability and has some athleticism and has some potential and has some pride, if they get into that fourth quarter thinking, hey, we can play with these guys, Notre Dame ain't that tough. They're not that bad, right? They're making mistakes. Then that team's going to say, hey, look, let's go make these plays. And that's exactly what Florida State did. This is the kind of game for me. If I'm as an analyst of Notre Dame, I want to see Notre Dame put this game away early. I do not want to let this become a 4-quarter game. And if it becomes a 4-quarter game, being on the road, it can get a little bit dicey. And I'll say this: the last time Notre Dame played, the last 2 times Notre Dame played Florida State, in 2018, Florida State quit. I mean, Notre Dame just ran them off the field. Notre Dame beat them last year soundly, but that was a Florida State team that did not lay down for Notre Dame. They battled Notre Dame, and that's the difference between and I've said this about this game on my show. I'm glad it's week 1, not week 10, this matchup, because I do like Mike Norvell. I do think he has the ability to overcome just in my opinion, terrible management and the terrible way in which Willie Taggart ran that program. There's a lot he's got to overcome. This is the kind of game where you don't want to let a team like that build confidence. And this team will battle. And that was the biggest difference between 2018 and 2020 is Florida State wasn't afraid of Notre Dame last year. They just weren't as good as Notre Dame was. That was the biggest difference.
We also don't badmouth Willie Taggart around.
Whoa.
You guys got to give me a list of things I can or can't say before I come on.
I will give you a list.
That's just Jason. That's just Jason. I was going to mention here, me and Mark will agree. Jason is a Willie Taggart lover. So we don't know why or what it is, but he does love Willie Taggart. But
there's
you're
some
right
photos
about
he has of you that you don't want anybody else to know about. I don't know how you can justify defending Willie Taggart.
Brian, the comments that you were making just now about Mike Norvell, it was almost as though you were listening to our conversation about 15 minutes ago.
Correct. He didn't go 3-6. That's why I like him.
The thing about Mike Norvell, though, is I've been studying Coach Norvell for a while. Number one, Notre Dame played Arizona State when he was the OC there, right? So I had a chance to study that offense. I got a chance to see it up close and personal. And then, of course, when Notre Dame hired Chip Long after the 2016 season, I spent a lot of time watching that Memphis team play. So I've been following him for a while. And look, any guy that's, when he's a player is going to get the cornrows like Mike Norvell did and those type of things. I think he's a good football coach. And if he can change the culture of this program, that's going to be the biggest key. And then, of course, right now they're recruiting really well, but it's a culture change. That's what Brian Kelly had to do when he replaced Charlie Weiss. And honestly, that's what Brian Kelly had to do to his own program after 2016. It required a culture change. Mm-hmm. And I think he's doing that. I thought last year's team was far more competitive and tough. I think he was willing to put his foot down and get rid of some guys that may have been talented but needed to go. And it's going to take some time because he inherited a mess. It's going to take some time. So I'm glad Notre Dame's getting him in week 1 and again not in week 10 or the season opener next year. Although Notre Dame starts Ohio State next year, so maybe I might want to take that game now.
And I feel more to me. I feel comfortable with Florida State starting off against Notre Dame like this because I think if Milton is healthy, that's just going to be the interesting thing there because they're going to run. I was going into this before all the Milton kind of news going out that there was going to be a 2-quarterback kind of situation. You're going to have not just Milton back there, but you'll have Jordan Travis out there. You can play a lot with this, and you're going to want to beat Notre Dame. This is a big time game for Norvell, the whole stadium, the fan base, but it really is a big question mark on the quarterback situation, and I think there's a lot that Florida State can try to do with Notre Dame, and I feel a lot more comfortable with facing Notre Dame in the first game rather than later on in the season. So it's interesting to hear your take that you feel a lot better that it's also, you're not having Norvell later on in the season to kind of get it down. It's a team that's still growing, like you just said, and the locker room had to be changed. The culture was really rotting. It was rotting, and a lot of changes have been made. There's still changes going on as we speak as of today, but there's just some things that he had to do, and there were some very talented guys. If you think about it, you had Tamarion Terry, you had Marvin Wilson. Tamarion Terry, who played very well against Notre Dame, and you look back a few months later, both Marvin Wilson and Tamarion Terry, the two big-time talents there, not even drafted, undrafted ones, not even, one's participating and playing with the Cleveland Browns. One of them's, dealing with some stuff off the field. That the whole thing with that transition from Willie Taggart to Mike Norvell, it's going to still take, I think, a whole nother year. But,
Brian, essentially, just giving you a heads up since you're new here with our Florida State Live. Basically, Mike Norvell can do no wrong to Logan, Mike Norvell is like his BFF. I think they have lunch together. They go out in Lake Ella. They have these lovely picnics together. I think that's what's going on there. Here's my question for you.
If I'm going to hitch my wagon to either Willie Taggart or Mike Norvell, I'm sorry, I'm going with Mike Norvell.
Willie Taggart never went 3-6, but here's my question for you.
Oh my gosh, don't.
Getting back to our topics here.
He inherited the worst Florida State roster in 40-some years.
During a pandemic, but I'm not. That's just a waste of time.
Logan, excuse me. I was speaking to our guest here, Brian from Irish. Was it Irish Illustrated?
Irish Breakdown.
Irish Breakdown. I apologize. Irish Breakdown. After this game, Notre Dame they go to Wisconsin, or I believe that's in Green Bay, or is that?
It's going to be in Chicago.
Oh, it's in Chicago. Okay, so they go to Chicago. They go to Virginia Tech. They have USC at home. Is this the toughest road game, or are you concerned maybe about that Virginia Tech game? Where is your mindset as a Notre Dame supporter?
I think the game that concerns me the most is the Virginia Tech game for a couple reasons. I first of all, I think the Virginia Tech road game experience is overrated. We were there in 2018, and it's not the atmosphere that they make it out to be on ESPN. And shocker that ESPN misanalyzes certain things. That's a big shocker. But it's more about number one. I think the thing that concerns me, just looking at it from a Florida State or Notre Dame, Virginia Tech standpoint, is Virginia Tech is one of the few teams on the schedule that I think athletically can run with Notre Dame in some key areas. Number two, I think where it comes on the schedule. It's right between a 2-game stretch against Wisconsin and Cincinnati, and then after that they have North Carolina or USC and North Carolina. So it's right in between that 4-game stretch of the perceived 4 best teams on the schedule. So, that's the game I'm concerned about. And look, Notre Dame hasn't lost at home since the season opened, the second game of the year in 2017 against Georgia by a point, and they went on to be the national runners-up. Where Notre Dame has kind of stubbed their toe the last few years has been on the road. It was that city south at the bottom of the state of Florida in 2017. It was out at Stanford. It was at Georgia in 2019. It was at Michigan in 2019, and it's been obviously postseason games. So I think those are the games you look at and say those are the ones that you're most concerned about, those true road games. And of those matchups, I think Virginia is the better coach team. They're the more fundamentally sound team, the tougher team, but Virginia doesn't have the athletes that Virginia Tech does. And to me, that's why that game's a little bit more concerning. And you guys know this, being ACC guys, Virginia Tech seems to do that like once a year. They underachieve under Fuente, but they have that one game where they just play out of their minds. I just hope that it's not the Notre Dame game.
Will you be making your way to Tallahassee for the opener?
I will. Yes. Yes. So it'll be my second game at what is it called? Bobby Bowden Field. Okay. It'll be my second game at Bobby Bowden Field.
My final question for you, and this is mostly just because I want to see Mark's eyes roll in the back of his head here real quick. How much do you enjoy watching games on NBC? Tell us your favorite part about watching games on NBC.
Well, I don't really watch games on NBC the way a traditional fan does. I'm usually in the press box for games, and then I'll watch the game afterwards with the sound down, and I'm just breaking down the game and doing my grade. So honestly, I don't really pay a lot of attention to it. And
Brian, help me out here. Brian, the answer we're looking for is it's great and you love the Peacock. Please say
okay. I've also vowed to never come on a show and lie. So, but I honestly don't. I kind of look at games a little bit differently. But
that is Brian Driscoll, Irish Breakdown. If you're a Notre Dame fan, this goes without saying. My goodness, I would hope that you are aware of Brian's work in Irish Breakdown. It's phenomenal. But beyond that, if you just want to understand and track and follow the elite programs, the elite brands, then follow Brian and Irish Breakdown right here on YouTube. And your audio podcasts are available on all the various platforms, correct?
Yes, sir.
Excellent.
Yep.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Yep. Thanks for having me on, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you, Brian. Nice meeting you.